Hi, it's Charlie Zeiss with Stargate Pyramids and the Pyramid Science Foundation. Today, we are pleased to have Lisa Richards on for the full session. She's going to be explaining something that many of you have been asking about for a long time, and that's how to make your very own bionized sand. Bionized sand is one of the products that Lisa offers on her website, pyramidsurge.com. It's an amazing amplifier of pyramid energies. It's something that was originally invented by Wilhelm Reich, but as Lisa will tell you, she has been using this for quite some time, and people have been asking how to do this. So that's what this session is devoted to. Take it away, Lisa.
Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, so bionized sand is pretty easy to make, but there is a certain process that you should follow. So I'm going to go over what bionized sand is, how to make it, and how to enhance your Stargate pyramid and put it in the poles of your Stargate pyramid. It'll be like sitting in a giant quartz crystal when you're done. So let me get started here. Okay, so like I said, bionized quartz sand, what is it? How are we going to make it, and how to supercharge your Stargate pyramid? Well, Wilhelm Reich, I'm sure you're all familiar with him and his discoveries of orgone energy. He also discovered the process of bionization. Bionization was a process of freezing and boiling several different times, which infuses that quartz sand with life force energy. And he actually saw this underneath his microscope. He was watching a piece of grass a blade of grass as it was dying. And he saw these little blue luminescent orbs of energy underneath his microscope. And they were very, very small, about 1 micron in diameter and oval in shape. But they had a blue luminescent glow that just radiated energy fields. He also referred to this energy, these bions, as orgone energy vesicles. He said, let me show you a little picture of them. You can see them in this picture, these little blue luminescent orbs. Those are the bions that he was seeing. And he said bions are really just transitional forms between non-living and living material. You know, you could do it with organic material, but you could also do it with things like metals as well. That's where he saw these bions appear as well. And that's one thing that I do. When I do my orgone pyramids, and like this one, for instance, there is metal in them. I don't put metal in the capstones because that deflects some of the power, dulls down some of the power of the Stargate. So you can use orgone pyramids. Those have metal in them. But I do bionize that metal. And all the crystals that I use in my capstones or any of the pyramids that I make, I bionize those as well. So I'm infusing those products with life force energy. And the cool thing is, it retains that energy indefinitely, forever. It never dissipates. So it will always, always, always have a high vibration. Okay, here's another picture of the bions that he was seeing. Now, another thing that he discovered too was that heating created a quicker breakdown, a quicker disintegration of this matter. And that's when you would start seeing the bions. They would slowly start appearing the longer, you know, as through the dying process. The longer it was laying there disintegrating, the more bions would appear. And then the cooling actually made them more reactive. So the freezing and boiling, the expanding and contracting was, you know, to me like a pumping effect, you know, heating and cooling, expanding, contracting, and just getting them charged up. Here's another picture of Wilhelm Reich. And, you know, one thing, he was done dirty, like a lot of scientists back in the day. Wilhelm Reich was from Austria originally. He was a physician and a psychoanalyst. And he got into healing people for free with his orgone technology. He had to move a lot of different places because, you know, a lot of the governments weren't very keen on his work. So he moved from place to place, and he eventually came to the States, where he thought he would be living the American dream, but it turned into a nightmare for him. He did public displays of healing with his orgone technology. He healed thousands of people for free in the public setting. So there was many witnesses. He was still arrested for fraud. His books were burnt. His work was stolen. And I think it was about 2 weeks before he was supposed to be released from prison, he died of a heart attack. I'm sure he did, you know. So there's a lot of things that have been happening like this to true healers around the world for many, many years, and he is one of them. So I'm going to go over step by step here. I'm a picture person, so I got a lot of pictures to share with you today, but I'm going to show you how to make bionized quartz sand. Sand was one of the items that he bionized, but you can actually bionize other things, like I said, crystals. You can bionize metals as well, infuse them with that life force energy. Now, aqua quartz is the sand that I prefer, and it's also the sand that Charlie uses in his enhanced Stargate Pyramids in the base. It's very high quartz content sand. It's 97% quartz. So that is ideal to use. It's very high silica sand. I wouldn't get clay sand, you know, something like that. The whiter the sand, the higher the quartz content typically. So look for that. And actually in Florida, I believe it's, let me see, Siesta Key Beach in Sarasota, Florida has the highest quartz sand content. And I was so lucky to have one of my customers actually send me about 20 pounds of that sand. It was amazing to get it. You know, of course, it got lost on the way here and there was a little trouble on the way, but I can't wait to bionize that and see the difference. So aqua quartz sand is what I typically get. This bag weighs about 50 pounds. So, you know, it doesn't look like it weighs that much, but it is pretty heavy to haul around. So just be wary of that. It's only about $14 a bag where I live. And I usually get it at a swimming pool. Places have it because people use it for their filters. Another thing you're gonna need, usually one bag, I use 2 big stock pots. This is an old canning pot, which is perfect. I fill it half full with half a bag of sand, and then I'd have another one to fill the other half of sand in as well. Okay, of course, that's what the sand looks like when you open up the bag. Sometimes when I get it, it's a little bit wet. I don't know if they put it in there that way or if it's just how it's stored at the place I get it, but just keep that in mind as well. But it doesn't matter, you're going to be adding water to it anyway. So cut the bag open and put it in your pot. Okay, and then you're going to add water to it. And I always add enough water, about 3 to 4 inches above the sand is where you're going to want the water line to be. One thing you're going to want to do is make sure you put a little label on the side, a little sticker, and we're going to have to do this process 3 times. So mark it for the first time, especially if you're going to do quite a bit of it, because it gets a little confusing after a while if you don't. Okay, you're going to put it on the stove, turn it up on high, and then once it starts to boil, once the water starts coming to a rolling boil, you can simmer it. I just leave it on full boil pretty much the whole time, and I put splatter shields on top of it because that hot sand splashing out, I mean, it's like they're like little rockets going all over the place. So make sure you protect yourself from that and put some splatter shields. I get those at the dollar store. They're pretty cheap. So once it starts to boil, I set my timer. I prefer 33 minutes just because that's, I like that number. I like synchronicity and I like that number, but it really only has to be 25 to 30 minutes total. So set your timer once it starts to boil and you're ready to go. Now, after it boils, you want to set it outside and let it cool off for a while. Once it cools down to, you know, the outside temperature or whatever, then put it in your chest freezer. or any type of freezer if you have room for it. What I do is, now these pans are really heavy. Like I said, the bags of sand are already 50 pounds. So just one of these pans filled half full is 25 pounds of sand. And then you're adding the water on top of it. So it could be 30, 35 pounds, pretty heavy. You're gonna hurt your back if you put it in the very bottom of your chest freezer. So what I do is I put a 5-gallon bucket, as you can see in this picture, at the bottom of the chest freezer, just to raise the level up. And then I put the pots on top of that. It's a lot easier for me to pick up and set in there, and you're not gonna hurt your back. Okay. And then you're gonna leave it in the freezer for about 24 hours. Till it's completely frozen, and you leave the water right in it. Now, I do drain some of the water. If there's too much water and it's splashing all over, I do drain some of it, but I like to leave the water covering the sand before I put it in the freezer. Okay, once you pull it out of the freezer, I like to set it outside in the sun or somewhere where it's going to thaw fast. And then once it thaws, you're going to begin the process again. So like I said, we're going to do this 3 times. Make sure you mark number 2 on the side of the pot. And then you're going to go bring it to a boil again. Set your timer for 33 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes. Let it cool. And then you're going to freeze it about 24 hours. Okay. You're going to set it out and let it thaw, and then we're going to repeat the process again. So mark number 3, so you know, on your pot, boil, set your timer, freeze it, and then we're coming to the final thaw. So pretty much that's the process of bionizing sand. So right now you have supercharged sand in these pots, and we're just waiting for it to thaw. Okay, once it does thaw, you want to drain the water off of it. Be careful when you do, because this sand likes to all of a sudden just splash out of the container in great big clumps and end up on the ground pretty fast. So you don't have to drain out all the water. We're going to be scooping it out anyway. So I just like to drain off some at the top. Now, this is a container that I got for $1 at the Dollar Tree. They work really well. So any type of container that has little vents or little drain holes on the bottom is ideal. Now the sand is still small enough, it's going to go through those holes. So I always add some very fine screen, cut some out, and you're going to place that right in the basket as well. Okay, and then you just start scooping the sand out. You're going to scoop it out and fill that basket up. And once it's full, it still has a lot of water in it. So I like to set it kind of at an angle for a while, so the water drains down and out the bottom of it. Now, once the sand is drained, mostly of the water, I have a wire rack that I put my sand on, and it works really well. It keeps the airflow going, and then I have a really big commercial powerful fan, so it's blowing on there. And then occasionally throughout the day, I'll go and kind of just stir up the sand, you know, a little bit here and there, just to create more airflow. If it's a nice sunny day though, this is my preferred method of drying. I have a little table set up outside, and I put a garbage bag on it, and I just spread the sand on it. And then throughout the day, as it's drying, I just swish my hand around in it. And I really feel like the sun really activates more of the healing ability of the bionized sand. Okay, so this is the end product. This is the Bionized Quartz sand. And I did a Bovis reading with just the aqua quartz sand before I bionized it. And the reading was 50,000. The Bovis reading after I bionized it was all the way up to 50 billion. 50 billion life force energy. I mean, that's a huge reading. So, and that's a product that's going to retain that high vibration indefinitely. you know, you can use it to supercharge everything. You know, it supercharges your Stargate pyramid. You're going to supercharge your crystals, your water, your food. I mean, everything that's around it, yourself, supercharge your healings. You know, some people actually take the Bionized sand and they call them Bion packs. They just put some in a baggie, put a natural cover on it, like cotton, and then just use that for any types of aches and pains. If you have an achy knee, put that on your knee. If you have a headache, put it on your headache. Or yeah, put it on your head. It's going to get rid of your headache. So you can use it for a lot of different things. One website I saw, she recommended using it outside for like labyrinths. You know, anywhere there's some type of a spiritual energy or more energy is required. You know, crystal grids. You know, you could grid your house or something outside with it. But there's a lot of things that you can do with the Bionized sand as well. And I always put a layer of it in each one of my capstones. This one actually has some, but it has black pigment in it, so you really can't see it that well. But there is Bionized sand in each one of my capstones, so it's always going to retain that high vibration. Now I'm going to show you, I get a lot of questions on how to put it in your pyramid, and it might sound simple, but there's a little bit to it because you can't just plug the ends and go. I found that out the hard way because what I like to use to plug the ends is a resin or beeswax, one or the other. So what happens is when those products dry, they shrink and they pull away from whatever you're putting them in slightly. So if you just pour the beeswax or the resin in the bottom of the pole, it's gonna fall out eventually. And I found that out the hard way when I was moving my Stargate to my new home because I picked it up and out comes the plug and all the sand flew everywhere. So you don't want that to happen. So I'm going to show you the way to do it. Now, when you first get your Stargate pyramid, 4 of the poles will have end caps on them, like in this picture, and they'll have a zip tie. They already have holes at the end of the poles. And those are perfect. So we're not going to drill any extra holes in these poles right here. And we're going to leave the end caps on. So all you have to do is clip the zip tie there and remove it. Okay, you can see that end cap is still on. Okay, this Gorilla Tape is one of my best friends. I use it for everything. If you use standard duct tape, sometimes it might leak. So I like using the Gorilla Tape because it puts more pressure around the holes and it won't leak out. If it does leak, that's fine. I'll show you how to clean it up, but it just creates more work for you. So get some Gorilla Tape, cut some little strips, and we're gonna cut a strip big enough to go around the pole and cover up the holes at the end. Okay. So those 4 poles are the only ones that have holes in the end. The other poles, we're going to have to drill the holes ourselves. So I usually do it about 1/4 to 1/2 inch from the bottom of the pole. And I like to drill 4 holes in each one. I have a Dremel set up as a drill press, but you can also use a hand drill. And it doesn't really matter how big of the holes are. I like to make them just big enough for the resin or the beeswax to seep into because that's what's going to give them leverage, something to hold on to so the plugs don't fall out. And I show you how 2 holes on this side, 2 on the other side. Okay, so now that this pole is open at both ends, we're going to have to leave one end of the pole open, of course, to pour the sand in and pour the resin in. But we have to plug off one end so everything doesn't fall out. So you need a big piece of tape and then you need a thin strip of tape as well. Now the big piece, we're going to plug this end with. So just put the tape right on there like so, and then fold up the corners up around it. Now I like to actually take that little strip and wrap it around that just to make sure that we get all the holes plugged properly as well. Wherever, especially if you use resin, wherever it can find a place to seep out of, it will. So just make sure that's nice and tight. Now I like to use the resin and the beeswax too, because I feel like it creates more of a continuous flow throughout your whole entire Stargate pyramid. I know you can use quartz if you want to as well, but I just really feel that the beeswax and the resin makes more of a continuous flow of the energy. Okay, so right now you have the bottom of the pole all taped up, and there can be 12 to 16 poles in your Stargate pyramid when you receive it, so you have to do this to all of the poles, okay? We're gonna plug the one end, but the other end is just gonna have the 4 holes in it, and then we're gonna tape just around one time and leave the top of it open so we can pour stuff in, the resin and the sand or the beeswax. Now there are 4 poles sometimes in your Stargate pyramid when it arrives that has the external connectors already on the poles. And sometimes you could be a muscle man like Samson and not be able to take these off. They're like on there permanently. So in that instance, if you can take them off, it's ideal if you take them off. Sometimes they're stuck on there pretty hard though, and you can't get them off. So if that's the case, just leave them on there. And all you would do is you can see the lip inside here. Just fill it up right before that lip when you pour the sand and the resin in there. Make sure if you do drip on the inside of this connector, you're gonna have to take a Dremel or something and clean that out, something to chisel it out or something, because that will cause the other pole not to be able to slip in there. So just be very careful when you do pour into this if you leave the coupler on. Okay, and I have these little, I don't know what they're called, but they're little hooks that I got that hold the 3/4 inch PVC pipe perfectly. So I have these all lined up in my shop, and you just start hanging your poles on each one. And you can see on this pole at the top here how I have that one piece of tape around the top just to cover up those 4 holes, and the top is open for us to pour into. Okay, and this is where you would mix up your resin. I like to use a fiberglass or polyester resin just because it's quicker. You can use epoxy resin if you like as well, but this seems to set up the fastest for me. You can also use beeswax if you want to melt some beeswax and use that instead. So get your resin ready, and you're going to want to pour, I usually pour about 1 ounce of resin in the bottom of each pole. And I let it sit in there for just a few minutes, just until it gets to the very bottom of the pole. You know, it's probably dripping and sliding down the pole a little bit. So you don't want to put the sand in until the resin's all the way at the bottom of the pole. Okay, and then you grab, once the resin's at the bottom, you grab a cup of sand. And I like to use, I like to use these paper cups because you can fold them. Now, I always fold it just a little bit, kind of like and just let it pour out the small side, because if you don't do that, the sand gets all over the place. Okay, and then you want to pour the sand in the pole. It usually takes about 2 8-ounce cups per pole, sometimes a little bit more, depending on what size Stargate pyramid you have. Okay, and fill it all the way to the top. Then you're going to pull it off of that holder, and you're going to bang this pipe on the ground several times to get this sand to settle. You can see here I have my hand covering the top of it, and you're going to bang it up and down a few times. So like you just saw, it was already full, and just banging it a few times, it already settled this much. So we're going to do that a few more times just to get it impacted as much as you can. And you'll be amazed by how much it settles just by banging it a few times. So bang it a few times, and then pour a little bit more sand in, and then bang it on the ground a few more times, pour some sand in. Just do that a few times. Now, once the sand is almost to the top, I like to leave a little bit of a lip there. You're going to pour some resin or the beeswax in the top of it. The beeswax, you'll probably want to mix some sand in with that and then pour that with the sand. I like using the resin. Like I said, it's a lot easier, but the resin is thin at first until it starts curing. So it's going to trickle down and it's going to sink down in here, and we're going to have to add a little bit more after that happens. So you want to pour the resin on the top and just try to be easy. You know, I like to keep a paper towel in one of my hands as I'm pouring this, and then I catch the drips, because every drip that you drip on the poles, you're going to have to eventually clean off. So it's better if you just prevent that in the first place, trying to catch the drips, and just take your time and just try to be meticulous when you do pour it, and it's going to cause less work for you down the road. So you're going to fill that up to the top, try not to overflow it. And so this is about 20 minutes later. The resin already settled. The cure time for this resin is about 20 minutes, so it's already hardened up. But I'd like to add a little bit more just to make sure it's even with the top of the pole. So we're going to mix up a little bit more resin and pour that in the top. Like so. And then you can see this is what it looks like when it's done. I took the tape off. There should be no sand, no loose sand coming out of the holes. If that does happen, and it does happen sometimes, I would lay the pole on its side and then pour a little bit more resin right in the hole that the sand was leaking out of. Yeah, you want to make sure that all the holes are plugged thoroughly before you start assembling your Stargate. Now, when you do take the tape off, you will have some little leaks. You can see here where the holes have some of the resin that has leaked and dried. There's also residue on here from the tape, so the sticky residue from the tape. So we want to make sure that the ends of these poles are perfectly smooth so they can go into the connectors perfectly. So what I like to do is take a sharp knife, and I just go and shave off the resin that's dried around the holes. And I do it a few different times just to make sure, you know, feel that hole there after you do it. Make sure that it's perfectly smooth. Now you can see at the top of this pole, there's some dried resin as well. It's kind of heaped up there. So what I do to clean up the ends of the poles is to grab my little sander, and I just use the rotary sander and sand the top of it. And it comes out perfect afterwards. Now you just want to sand the resin off. You don't want to, you know, sand deep into the pole and affect the height of the pyramid. So just sand the resin off until it's perfectly smooth. Now for the white poles, this is the tape. This is the sticky residue that's left on there from the tape. For the white poles, it's ideal to use fingernail polish remover. It comes right off with that. As you can see, it came right off. Just a little cotton ball with some nail polish remover. But for the black poles, if you use nail polish remover to clean up any resin spills or resin drops or anything, it's going to cause little smears all over your pyramid. And there's no fixing that unless you paint it. So if there's any residue that ever drips on the black Stargate pyramids, I always take just like the backside of a butter knife, and I would just lightly scrape off any of the resin that would be stuck to that. And then you can even take a green scrubby. And that's what I do to the white poles as well, just to clean them up a little bit more. Take a green kitchen scrubby and just kind of go around the edges or around the whole entire pole and shine that up a little. Okay, so like I said, we need to make these ends really smooth so the couplers go on. And then you can start assembling your Stargate. When I put the couplers on the pipes, I like to bang the end with the coupler on the ground a couple times just to get it to go in entirely. Make sure it's flush with that little lip that's inside the coupler there. Now, if you fill your vertical poles, which is ideally what I love to do because it's going to create more energy. So if you fill your vertical poles with the bionized sand, the weight of the poles is going to cause the Stargate to bow in slightly. So to prevent that, it's highly recommended that you get one of my apex amplifier plates. Now that's going to sit about a foot below the apex. And right here is where you would see the bowing mostly, and it holds it in place perfectly fine and gives it more stability and eliminates the bowing. But there you have it, voila! Your little quartz crystal Stargate pyramid, your supersonic, supercharged Stargate pyramid, filled with bionized quartz sand and ready to roll. Okay. Well, there you have it. That's all there is. That's the process, you know, to bionization, to how to make bionized sand. A little bit of the history behind it, if you have time, you know, look into it a little bit more, and Wilhelm Reich and his work. There's actually a man who does a lot of his work as well. His name is James DeMayo, and he runs the Oregon Biophysical Research Lab in Oregon. He has a ton of information out there to share on Wilhelm Reich and his work. I was unaware of bionization. I always knew about Wilhelm Reich and his orgone energy, and that's what got me into making my orgone pyramids years ago. It was about a year ago, though, that I found out about bionization, and I just started implementing that and using it in my products as well. But like I said, you can use it for anything. The bionized sand is going to infuse products with life force energy and just keep that high supercharged vibration indefinitely and help enhance your healing as well.
Cool. Well, I have some questions that, and if I'm trying to listen and think about what other people might be interested in knowing about as well. First question, do you need to stir the sand when you're boiling it? Like, you know, I'm used to stirring my vegetables or anything, but do you need to do that?
No, I would stay away from it while it's boiling, because it's like molten lava shooting out of a volcano if you go over by the thing. So okay. That's why it's ideal to just leave the splash guards on it, let it boil, and then turn it off when you're done. I mean, if I forget to put the splash shield on it, there's sand covering the top of my oven, like my stove, when I'm done.
Right. Okay, next question. It looked like the freezer you were using, you didn't have any other frozen objects in there. So, I mean, I just want to know, if I have a big, which we do, we have a full deep freeze, am I going to be able to leave my other food in there, or should I preferably have a smaller portable freezer where I can do this totally by itself? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, definitely. You can use your own freezer if it has food in it, but you need to make sure that your sand cools down completely before that, because if you put the sand in the deep freezer when it's hot, it's going to cause a lot of condensation in there. It's going to start melting the ice. Could start melting some of your food and unthawing it. So just make sure the sand's cooled completely before you put it in the freezer.
Okay. And then approximately how long does it take to dry, either with the fan technique that you showed or drying it out in the sun?
Well, you know, it really depends. The containers that I have, I mean, they're still about this thick. So as long as you stir it throughout the day, it's going to dry a lot faster if you're when you're using the fan, as long as you stir it. It's still going to take, though, a couple of days for it to get completely dry that way.
Right.
So just keep that in mind. Ideally, it's what I used to do is I just take a window screen and I would put a thin layer of sand on that. And then I would set some bricks on my table outside and kind of have it just raised up, or even you can have the fan inside, just a thinner layer of sand. It's gonna, of course, dry faster. So any way you can make the layer thinner,
Right.
you know, keep that ideal. But I like drying it out in the sun. I feel that supercharges it even more.
Yeah. I'm just thinking out loud. My significant other likes to dehydrate food. And I wonder if you could put it in a dehydrator. It probably work well as well if you had something like that. So
yeah, well, some people, I was reading some online where some people were asking about putting it in a an oven, drying it in an oven,
right.
or this or that. So I feel that that might affect the energy. I'm not for certain, but I just feel that it's going to take maybe from the energy if you do dry it that way. So
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, that's good, but that's good to know. It's better to just take the time and do it right, either just with the sun or with air. And then what kind of resin, do you have a recommendation on the type of resin that people should use for this process?
Well, I use clear casting resin for all of my products. But this, you won't need it. Clear casting resin is going to be more expensive. You don't need that because it's going to be inside of the poles anyway. So I would recommend just the cheap fiberglass resin that you can buy in the auto parts section at Walmart, you know, or something like that. You can order, like I said, epoxy resin. You can use any type of resin. I like the fiberglass or the polyester resin for this just because it cures faster within 20 minutes, where epoxy, it might take hours for it to harden.
So that was fiberglass or what kind?
Polyester resin.
Polyester. Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'll put that on the screen. And then an idea that came to my mind, I don't know if you've tried it on when you were cleaning off the black poles, you said you had difficulties. Did you try anything like Gooby Gone or any of those kinds of products?
No, I haven't. No,
Yeah.
no, but that's a good idea.
Okay. Well, we can try that and see what happens. Next question. What are I didn't quite understand what the purpose of the 4 holes were that you put at the corner, you know, at the end of each of the poles.
Okay, so those are to prevent the plugs from falling out, because if you just were to pour the resin or the beeswax in the bottom of the pole, when they cure, when they dry, they shrink a little and they pull away from the edge of the pole. So your plug will eventually fall out the end. So we need to create an area for it to grip onto. So that's the reason for the holes.
Okay.
It's creating the resin and the beeswax to seep into those holes to anchor it in.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then just the last, this is just a comment. When you buy the Apex amplifier, the way that it helps to support it, and I'm sure you have this in the instructions, you have these O-rings that will help to hold. If you put objects on that without the O-rings, it actually makes the sag a little bit worse. But the way the combination of the O-rings, you can actually put those in a particular location, which will keep the poles extended out, and the amplifier will not come down once you've set those O-rings in the proper location. So it all works great. Now, yeah. Using this technique in the vertical poles, do you not, if it is the sand actually touching between the poles? I know it's very close, but is that important, or should people what I'm asking is, should people try to get the sand to, you know, come just a tad, you know, or try to make that happen? You know, what do you think?
Yeah, that's ideally what I'm trying to do, is create a constant flow of energy.
Yeah.
And so ideally, if they do touch, that's what you would like it to do. But when you use the connector, there might be a little bit of a gap in there.
Yeah.
But that's why I like to bang the pole as much as I can on the ground, just to put the connector in tightly to make sure that it's pressed in there tightly.
Okay. Okay.
But I think, I feel like if you were to use rubber, I know that you like to use corks for the base of your pyramid, which it really wouldn't matter for them either, because the connectors at the base there's a gap there anyway for the connectors.
Yeah.
We're not putting sand in the connectors at the base. So if you wanted to, you could use the corks for the base. I like to use the resin or the beeswax though, especially for the vertical poles.
Okay. Okay. And the reason you prefer that to corks for what reason?
Well, it just goes back to the orgone energy, the layering of organic and inorganic materials. Resin, beeswax is going to be an organic material because it's carbon based. And
Yeah.
I feel it creates more of that orgone bion energy to travel through the poles. Whereas something like rubber or cork kind of impedes energy and would cause it to stop right there instead of flow.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right.
Dina,
Well,
any
those are my questions. Dina,
So-
do you have any questions, Dina?
I do, yes. Actually, the question that I have was posed to me by a friend, and I didn't know the answer, so I'll ask it. So you know how with water, like the water that has been charged in the Emoto experiments,
Mm-hmm.
and it is said that if you take like a little bit of that charged water and then add it to non-charged water, it supposedly changes the energy of the non-charged water. She asked me, could the same thing be done with bionized sand? She said, could you take some bionized sand and add it to non-bionized sand, and would that actually change the energy?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure on that, but that's
Yeah.
a good question. That would be something to look into for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, yeah, she was just curious. The other thing is, you mentioned the O-rings. I know you've talked about that before. Are they now being included with the amplifier base? Yeah.
Yeah. That was Charlie's idea. And it was great
Yeah.
because we used to use zip ties at first, and sometimes the zip ties would slide down the pole. Those O-rings fit perfectly, and they put just enough pressure to hold it on. I think Charlie had a 25-pound weight or something on his Apex amplifier platform, and those O-rings held it right there straight.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and like I say, it allows you to position it. You have to play with it a little bit, but if you position it at just the right level, it's going to push the poles out and take away all that sag from putting the sand in the vertical pole.
Yeah.
So,
And going back to your other question, Dina, of course, the bionized sand is going to help charge things like crystals. If you have crystals that need a little charge, they'll charge that. I'm not sure though about the if it bionizes other things though. I wouldn't think it would, because we had to go through the process of doing it in the first place, but I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I ordered some from you, so I prefer just I ordered enough for the entire pyramid. So,
well, some people even put it in the tops of their plants, in their planters, because it's going to help the growth of the plant too.
Yeah.
very cool.
And just out of curiosity, I mean, I think it sounds like the resin is the easiest way to go, but when you referenced quartz, Charlie, what form, I'm just out of curiosity, I'm not going to use that method, but I think I'm just going to go with, the resin, but I'm trying to picture what that looks like, and what form does that come in quartz? Is it solid already and you just
Quartz resin, you mean? Is that what you're talking
quartz resin?
No, I don't understand the question, I guess. I don't know what
Charlie was using quartz to plug.
Oh, no, corks. I'm sorry. Corks.
Quarks. C-O-R-K-S. Quarks.
It sounded like quartz.
No, no, yeah, no. I mean, the way I
That would be ideal.
historically has been with number 8 corks.
Corks, yes. Okay.
Or with when I used to make clear pyramids, rubber stoppers, but
Yeah.
you know, that's what that was about. So, you know, I might be interested in switching over here. Now that I know how to do it, I'm going to see if maybe we could start to use bionized sand in the basis as well. So, you know, we'll see how that goes moving forward. For people who might not want to buy a 50-pound bag of aqua quartz, if they're only doing one pyramid, that's overkill. But can you give people an approximate idea of how much sand they would need for just the base or for their entire pyramid?
Yeah, so it takes anywhere, oh goodness, I think it's like 7 to 9 pounds of sand if you just want to do the base of your pyramid.
Right.
So it's going to be, you know, about 16 to 17 pounds if you want to do the whole entire pyramid with the vertical poles and everything.
Okay. So you're going to need that, even though 50 sounds like a lot, that would be only enough to do 2 or 3 pyramids, basically. Maybe 3 pyramids. So,
but like I said, you can use it for so many other things.
Sure.
You know, make a little, and this is one of the products I'm going to start offering soon too. Put some in a little pillow, like a little eye pillow with some lavender or something, and make a little eye pillow for when you have a headache. Make a little neck pack, you know, for when you have neck problems or anything like that. Put some in your plants, you know, if you're into making labyrinths, I mean, just using that for the outside of your labyrinth, can you imagine how activated that will be?
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that you could use it for.
Okay, so there's plenty of alternate uses. People shouldn't worry about having leftovers and not knowing what to do with it, because if they've got a big enough pot to do it, you would suggest going ahead and doing the full 50 pounds and using the rest of it for other things. So. Perfect.
Oh yeah, definitely. And on my website, I think the lowest that I sell is, I think, 8 pounds. I'll have to check again, but you can order like about 8 pounds at a time, or you can order 17 pounds. If you already have a Stargate and you want, you know, to add bionized sand to it, you can do that by ordering, or just follow my instructions. It's pretty easy to make. It's a little time consuming, you know, it'll take you about a week from beginning to finish. 4 days to a week by the time it dries and everything. So
wow, great. Okay, well, do you have any more questions, Tina?
No, that was so thorough and explained so wonderfully well. There, you know, great. I want to thank you for taking the time to put that PowerPoint together and explaining everything. That was great. Yeah, it answered a lot of questions just watching the presentation.
Sure.
Good. Well, I want to thank the technology for being cooperating with me today. So
yeah, that's right. Now, Lisa, if people want to get in touch, have questions about their process, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, just send me an email, lisa@pyramidsurge.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Okay.
Well, Lisa, thanks so much for showing us how to do this. There have been a lot of people who have been asking for this how-to video for a long time. This will be in the how-to section on the Pyramid Science Foundation YouTube page, as well as our upcoming new Stargate Pyramids website. So we look forward to helping people energize their pyramids even more.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.